Good morning and welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us today for our presentation on the draft new customer contributions framework. So this is the final public forum in our current consultation process, and it's been designed to support a more consistent and effective application of the new customer contribution framework and to inform the final version of the framework. So my name is Angeline Billis and I'm the project manager for the new customer contribution review here at the Commission. I am joined today by our responsible Commissioner for Water, Rebecca Billings, and the Executive Director of Price Monitoring and Regulation, Marcus Crudden. So the purpose of today's forum is to bring together what we've heard and what we've done over the past 2 years as part of this new customer contribution review. We'll use this forum to walk you through the updates we've made to the new customer contributions framework, including where we've introduced measures to clarify, require, empower, encourage, and monitor elements of the framework. We also see this forum as an opportunity to gather your feedback before we finalise the framework paper. We are also seeking your feedback through Engage Victoria, where you can provide written submissions as well. So before we continue, I'd like to acknowledge country, and I am presenting on the lands of the Wurundjeri people. I acknowledge and pay my respects to the elders past and present who are the traditional owners of the lands and waterways on which we all live and work, and to the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people here today. And I extend my acknowledgement to all lands on which you are tuning in from today. I recognise and value the knowledge held by the First Nations people and the ongoing role in shaping and enriching the story of Victoria. So turning to the forum agenda and some housekeeping, today's forum will run for approximately 1 hour. And please note that we are recording this session and the recording will be made available on our website. We'll begin today by recapping the new customer contribution review and its objectives, including the purpose of the review, a recap of the legislative requirements of new customer contributions, and how the revised or the draft framework will apply from the 2028 water price review. The core part of today's session will focus on explaining what makes up our draft framework and how it has changed from the current framework. We'll outline the changes we've made, explain how we believe the framework will improve the implementations of new customer contributions going forward. You'll then have an opportunity to provide any feedback of any of the changes as we discuss them throughout this forum. And we'll conclude on how to provide your written feedback again and outline the next steps at the end of this forum. So your microphones will remain muted throughout this event and until we reach the designated Q&A segments. We have also disabled the chat function, so please submit any questions you have using the Q&A function and we'll capture them for the discussion. So the review process. As you may be aware, our NCC reviews has spanned almost 2 years of work. So we began in 2024 when we released our consultation paper in August to try and identify the issues and the problems. Following the release of the paper, we undertook a series of road visits to water businesses across Victoria over 3 months, and we also undertook a series of meetings with interested parties such as government departments and developers. So these meetings gave us insights into the challenges water businesses, developers and other interested parties were facing in implementing new customer contributions in practice, and this helped us shape the focus of the review. We then invited written submissions and continued discussions with water businesses and developers to test and refine our thinking. In June 2025, we published our report on interested parties' feedback, summarising what we heard from you and how that feedback influenced the next stage of our work. We then ran a further series of workshops during August and September 2025, focusing on areas where additional clarification was needed, such as engagement, costing, and modelling principles. We're now at the major milestone, the release of the draft new customer contribution framework. So the consultation on the draft is open until the 11th of November, providing another opportunity for you to share your feedback before we release the final framework. The final framework, we're aiming to release it in December, and in 2026, we'll continue supporting the sector through workshops and training materials to help the implementation and understanding of the framework. So the objectives of the new customer contribution frameworks, what are they? This review sought to improve compliance with the Water Act. So under the Water Act, connection contributions are required to be fair and reasonable, taking into account the benefit to that property relative to the benefit to other properties. To ensure compliance with the Water Act, water businesses must meet the Commission's new customer contributions pricing principles. These are to have regard to incremental infrastructure and associate costs in one or more of the statutory cost categories attributable to a given connection, to have regard to incremental future revenues that will be earned from customers at that connection, and new customer contributions are greater than the avoidable cost of that connection and less than the standalone cost of that connection. So throughout this engagement with water businesses and developers and detailed analysis, through engagement with water businesses and developers and detailed analysis of how NCCs were being applied, we've used this review to clarify expectations, strengthen our guidance, and update the framework so that new customer contributions are implemented more consistently and transparently across the sector. This work directly supports the objectives of the new customer contribution framework, which are to administer new customer contributions in a transparent way, share the costs and benefits of growth between new and existing customers, and send signals to connection applicants about the cost of developing in different locations. So what should new customer contributions must do? In terms of the legislative requirements, Section 268 of the Water Act sets out that new customer contribution charges must apply to the present day cost of any works that are used or will be able to be used directly or indirectly for the purposes of those services and any fire plugs attached to those works. Be calculated in a way that they are assessed by the authority to be fair and reasonable, taking into account the benefit of that property relative to the benefit of other properties, and be able to justify the reason why the payment was required in any of the works or services that have been or will be provided. So what are the Commission's principled approach to compliance? So the Commission's new customer contribution pricing principles have been designed to ensure that new customer contributions meet these legislative requirements in the Water Act. So pictured here in this slide is a summary of where our principled approach is reflected in the Water Act. The Commission's new customer contribution pricing principle states that new customer contributions have regard to incremental infrastructure and associated costs, considers the wording in the Act of any works that are used to apply to the sunk costs that are made to prudently anticipate the growth a connection contributes to. In contrast, the principle also captures works that will be able to be used through providing for forecast incremental costs. The Commission has also applied the incorporated incremental infrastructure and associated costs along with the pricing bound of standalone cost to ensure water businesses' new customer contribution calculations factor in the benefit to that property as required by legislation. The benefit to other properties is also covered in our new customer contribution pricing principles through the inclusion of incremental future revenues and the bound of avoidable cost. Now, going back to what we found in our at the beginning of our price review. So, sorry, not price review, the new customer contributions review. So we began a review of the new customer contributions to address a number of issues that became clear during the 2023 water price reviews, where new customer contributions were not always being applied in a way that achieved their intended purpose. This included unjustified cost attributions, poor engagement, uncertainty around gifted and reticulated assets, and issues with the average incremental cost modelling approach. We also recognise that over time, there's been some loss of knowledge and consistency in how the new customer contribution framework is being interpreted and applied. So this highlighted the need to clearly set out our expectations ahead of the 2028 water price review. The final new customer contribution framework will set out the Commission's expectations and requirements for water businesses from the 2028 water price review onwards. So this brings us to the next part of today's session and looking at what's actually changing in the framework. I'll now invite Commissioner Rebecca Billings to take you through the key updates we've made to the framework, and Commissioner Billings will lead a Q&A session after each section to give you an opportunity to ask questions and share your views as we go. Thank you.
Thanks, Angeline, and good morning, everyone. And I'd like to thank you all for what's been almost 2 years of engagement and work with the sector to come to this point where we have been able to release the draft new customer contributions framework. The draft framework outlines the regulatory arrangements for NCCs and defines the Commission's expectations and requirements for water businesses. As Angeline pointed out, we are really focused on making it easier for water businesses to comply with the legislation by meeting the NCC pricing principles. For some businesses, this may mean greater consideration, effort, and in some cases, additional resourcing to meet these requirements. The NCC requirements are intended to support good planning and transparent decision-making, improve the efficiency of connection processes, and make pricing efficient and in the long-term interests of all Victorians. During our consultation process, we heard a range of views. Some interested parties wanted more detailed guidance to help ensure NCC calculations align with the pricing principles. Others emphasised the need to avoid overly prescriptive rules, recognising the diverse operating environments of all the metropolitan, urban and regional water businesses. Our draft framework aims to keep that flexibility while introducing clearer expectations. It maintains the current pricing principles, retains standard NCCs where suitable, alongside the default negotiated NCCs that are provided for under the legislation. Compared with our current framework, the draft framework clarifies aspects of the regime's operation, empowers better informed NCC calculations and negotiations, requires minimal disclosures to support transparent and efficient NCC administration, encourages advanced practice through links to Primo ambition, and monitors and discloses key NCC metrics to track performance over time. We believe this draft framework provides both the flexibility that water businesses value and the structure needed to deliver fairer, more transparent outcomes for connection applicants across Victoria. We're now going to step through these changes in more detail, and after each section, I will open up for questions and discussion. So let's turn first to how the draft framework brings greater clarity and empowers water businesses and connection applicants. You can see the key elements of clarify and empower on the slide in front of you. One of the issues we heard from the sector that there is a lot of uncertainty that comes from how the existing framework is interpreted. And that inconsistency creates risk, confusion, and delays. The draft framework goes back to the NCC principles. It provides clearer guidance on how the NCC framework operates, intended to give everyone a consistent reference point. For example, the draft framework makes it clear that negotiated NCCs are the default under the Water Act. We did find that this hasn't always been well understood. Standard NCCs can still be used, but only when specific preconditions are met, and where we have evidence that is provided by water businesses during their price review process. We've also clarified what is meant by incremental costing. That's the additional cost a business incurs when it services a new development. The framework offers clearer direction, especially on how to handle things such as sunk costs, gifted assets, tax and financing, including cases where investment is brought forward earlier than originally planned. At the same time, NCCs also need to reflect incremental benefits, not just the costs. That includes extra revenue from new connections and savings that might come through things like upsized assets or the use of recycled water. The draft framework also explains how avoidable and standalone costs should be applied. NCCs should recover more than the cost of not servicing a development, but less than if that development was serviced on its own. It also outlines different ways water businesses can estimate these costs. Another thing that we have made clearer is how director attestations occur in their price submissions and how they apply to NCCs. This isn't a new requirement, as water businesses are already expected to provide attestations as part of the price review process. What the draft framework does is spell out how, more explicitly, the NCC proposals, connections policies, and negotiating frameworks all sit within that scope, so that boards must remain accountable for ensuring that these elements are not only compliant, but also of high quality and consistent with the framework. Dispute resolution is another area where we've added clarity. Every water business must offer internal review. They must also offer a pathway to independent commercial resolution, and they need to inform applicants of their rights to escalate these matters. And finally, this isn't just about clarifying the rules, it's also about giving you the tools you need to apply the framework well. We'll be releasing working models as well as some user guides. These are designed to help with calculating NCCs to support both water businesses and connection applicants. I'll pause now to see if there are any questions or comments on these changes. Mr. Heaps, welcome. Hopefully people are working on trying to get you off mute.
Oh, can you hear me now?
We can. Hello.
Okay. Hi, Rebecca. Hi, everyone else. Look, I thought those changes about clarity were really good, except I wonder whether there's one missing about what the Commission's expectations are in terms of averaging over larger zones. Well, from my point of view, I think that would be well worthwhile clarifying. do you have just one average zone, or if you've got to have if you've got to have one zone per water system or sewer system or whatever? So I think that is well worth clarifying.
Sure. Thanks, David. Angeline, did you want to take that one?
Thanks, Rebecca. So, I mean, our framework it allows for charges within those pricing bounds that we've set out. Now, should it exceed those, if averaging leads to not falling within those pricing bounds, what our framework is saying is relook at that, you cannot. We don't want to see proposals that where it doesn't meet those pricing principles. So I guess we haven't said it directly, but we've put it to I think water businesses and developers out there within sort of the framework guidelines and what the Water Act requires.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Angeline. I think if that isn't clear enough, we can certainly look to see if there's additional clarification that makes that even more explicit. Jenny Stern. Hi, Jenny. A little bit slow off the mute at the moment.
Hello, Rebecca.
Hi, Jenny.
Hi. So just my comments, I suppose, on the proposed updated framework was we had a bit of concern with a lot of the information that's being retired because a lot of it is useful, and especially the case studies, the 2011 case studies that really clearly articulate what the framework is trying to achieve in real life situations. Because reading through the documentation, it appears that there are some areas that are really lacking, such as gifting assets, what assets should or shouldn't be gifted, and included within the NCCs, as opposed to a developer being asked to gift assets that should be included in NCCs because they're network assets. So, a little bit more information around gifting assets and assets that have excess capacity that really are there for as network assets and shouldn't be paid for or gifted to the authority plus NCCs.
Thanks, Jenny, and absolutely acknowledge the usefulness of some of the information that is intended to be retired so that there is no confusion about currency. However, we have absolutely committed to providing further information, such as updated case studies, post the finalisation of the framework. So that is our intention in 2026, and we will definitely take your guidance in terms of which case studies are the most useful, and where further case studies might be useful as well.
Sorry, am I able to just ask one further question regarding in your document, you refer to connection policies that are going to be included, or you're going to request that the authorities provide. Will they be monitored by the essential services? You'll obviously go through that and make sure that all facets of it align with your policy documentation.
So the intention is for those documents to be submitted during the price review process, and that will be the expectation that they comply with the guidance. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Peter, if you could let us know your last name as well. Peter, you're up next. Are you able to take yourself off mute, Peter? All right, not sure what's happening with Peter, but Alyssa, maybe we could switch to you and see if you're able to come off mute.
Hi, Rebecca. My
Hi.
question relates to standalone costs. So I was just wondering whether or not water businesses have the ability to choose between the two methods that are being provided for standalone costs, or do we need to calculate with both methods and choose the lower cost estimate?
Direct that one to Angeline. Thanks, Alyssa.
Hi, Alyssa. When you say choose both methods, are you which methods are you talking about? Are you talking?
Sorry, they're on page 21 of the framework.
Okay, so I'm assuming you're talking about the incremental cost method and the
Yes.
your net cash flow methods. Yeah. So going forward, what we're saying is a water business and developer can work out the costs using the incremental costs or the current approach, average incremental cost approach, or our incremental cost approach, but they need to also consider the incremental benefits. And that's the part we're not seeing with those businesses that are using incremental cost. We're not seeing that they're actually applying what's required of the Act and the framework, which is costs and benefits. So we haven't, started on our modelling and our modelling guidelines, but we've put it out there in the draft framework that we're open to, on the costing side, open to both approaches.
Great, thank you. And can I just ask a follow-up question to that? So if we as a business have a preference for one of those two methods, should we outline that in our connection policy document so that there's clarity for developers and applicants? Would that be the best way to sort of indicate a preference for one of those approaches?
Yes, I think it's best to be as transparent as possible. That's one of our, key principles or the objectives of the framework. So it being in the connections policy would be great. Businesses could do that. Yeah. And Peter, I think you should now be able to ask a question. If on your end you unmute yourself.
We'll come back to Peter if we manage to get that working, but let's turn to the next section now. If we can get the slides back up, we will be turning to how the draft framework strengthens both the requirements on water businesses and our ability to monitor how those requirements are applied. This is about addressing two issues. First, the lack of clear information available to connection applicants. And second, the limited visibility in how NCC charges are developed and applied. To resolve these, the draft framework introduces minimum disclosure requirements. It also sets out a new approach to ongoing performance monitoring. Let me start with disclosure. One of the most consistent concerns raised by connection applicants is the lack of clear upfront information. Many applicants often don't know what they're being charged for or how to navigate the connection process. The draft framework addresses this by introducing a requirement that all water businesses must now prepare and publish a connection policy. This policy must include a minimum set of content, so that expectations are clear and consistent across the sector. The connections policy must set out the types of connection services available, the steps involved in applying for a connection, any charges that apply during the process, and how disputes will be managed. And importantly, it must also spell out what counts as a reticulation asset, which is critical for identifying when an asset needs to be gifted. These policies should not just be internal documents. They must be submitted with the water business's price proposal, and once approved, they need to be made publicly available. Alongside connection policies, the draft framework also strengthens how water businesses are expected to justify NCCs. This has been a recurring issue that we have heard during consultation. In the past, it hasn't always been clear how a charge has been calculated or how it relates to the actual costs of servicing a new development. That lack of transparency undermines confidence in the process. To address this, we are proposing a new requirement, a defined set of supporting information that for every standard NCC. Each proposal must include model calculations with underlying inputs clearly explained. It must also include a development servicing plan for each relevant area, a statement of how costs and benefits are attributed, and evidence that incremental benefits have been considered. For example, additional revenue or avoided costs. Finally, the proposal must demonstrate that the charge sits within the bounds of efficient pricing, and in particular, that it meets the avoidable cost test set out in our pricing principles. For negotiated NCCs, we expect businesses to provide a similar level of supporting information proportionate to the connection. Alongside these disclosure requirements, we are also proposing to strengthen how we monitor NCC performance. We don't think it is sufficient for us to only consider how water businesses are implementing their NCCs during the price review process. We need to understand how NCCs are being applied over time, and that's why the draft framework introduces annual performance disclosures. It is proposed that water businesses will be required to report each year on key NCC metrics, allowing us to track whether they are meeting both new and existing requirements during the regulatory period, not just at the start of it. Where the data points to issues or inconsistencies, we may choose to publish comparative performance commentary to highlight trends across the sector. Together, these measures give us a clearer line of sight of how NCCs are being used and to help ensure that the framework is being applied as intended. Again, I'll pause here now to see if there's any questions or comments on these matters. Alyssa, I think you were first up there. Feel free to jump in, Alyssa. Oh, no.
There we go. Sorry, I was just waiting for the unmute button to appear. My question just relates to the annual compliance and reporting requirements. Will that be incorporated as part of the annual water performance audit that is undertaken already?
Great question. And I will hand to Angeline to see if we have locked that down or still up for debate, that one, Angeline.
We haven't locked that down. It's still up for debate. So we haven't worked out, the most seamless way to implement it for water businesses, and that is one of the options. And if water businesses have a view on, the best way to do it, please send it through to us, because we'd be interested. We've got a few things in mind, but we do really want to hear from yourselves on that.
Thanks, Angeline. And Jenny, if you could come off mute, hopefully that will work for you. There we go.
Yes, all good. Hi, Rebecca. We definitely support the introduction of all those new disclosures. One, in addition to the list that was provided in your report that would be useful, would be freedom of information requests. Because like you're saying, transparency is critical with this new framework. And a lot of the time, we have to undertake freedom of information to get the information that's necessary to actually understand what we're contributing to and actually understand the documents that are available. So I think that would be useful from the developer's perspective, well, from yourselves, I suppose, to make sure that transparency is occurring.
Yeah, absolutely.
The other point that I was, I suppose, wanting to understand is with the authorities providing servicing plans, will you also ask for assumptions under it relative to, like, for an example, there are a lot of servicing plans that say sites are fully able to be developed, but the assumptions under it is that the developer is actually contributing, or not contributing, paying for a lot of those growth assets. So yes, it's fully developable on the servicing plan, but that's on an assumption that a developer is gifting all these assets.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Jenny. And I think that, that's a really great example of a transparent articulation of a policy and a process. And we could probably go into more detail, but I will leave that one for now. Maurice, you are next, if you're able to talk.
Yeah, I think so. I was just wondering, what sort of performance metrics might you be capturing as part of that framework?
We've listed a number of them in the draft framework. I don't have them right in front of me. Angeline, do you
I could go away and read it. Sorry, I haven't had a chance to read it yet.
No, you're right. I don't blame you if you haven't read Weighty Tomb just yet. That's why we're having this session. Maybe someone could post them in the chat. That would be great.
Thank you.
Peter, hopefully this time we might be able to get you to unmute and chat. All right, not working again there, unfortunately. Let's keep moving because we do have a lot to get through in quite a short time frame. If we can bring up the encourage slide. All right. The draft framework strengthens expectations on water businesses by linking NCC practice directly to Primo ratings. This change is intended to set a clearer benchmark. It signals that advanced, well-justified NCC practice is part of what we expect under Primo. It also provides a way to differentiate between businesses that are meeting minimum requirements and those that are demonstrating leadership. Throughout the consultation process, we have seen gaps in how some businesses engage on NCCs. In some cases, key stakeholders have not been consulted. In others, charges are presented without clear explanation or supporting rationale. This will no longer be acceptable. The draft framework makes it clear that several elements of Primo are directly relevant to how NCCs are developed and delivered. For example, one of the underlying issues here is how risk is managed. NCCs and asset gifting decisions involve trade-offs about who carries the cost and delivery risk. The water business, the developer, or in some cases, the broader customer base. These should not be seen as mere technicalities. They shape real outcomes, including when assets are delivered and who pays for them and when. The framework will set out the expectation that these risks are assessed transparently and reflected clearly in each business's NCC proposal. As we have articulated in our Primo framework, managing risk well is dependent on good, genuine engagement. Where those trade-offs affect applicants or customers, businesses need to show how they've engaged early, tested their approach, and responded to that input. That includes developers, but it also includes the broader customer base who may be impacted by these decisions. Strong engagement must be matched by strong performance. Connection services are a fundamental part of what water businesses deliver. Yet too often they are operating without clear service standards or public reporting. That's not acceptable in a mature regulatory environment. The draft framework encourages businesses to set clear targets for connection services and to publish performance against those targets. This gives connection applicants confidence in what to expect. It also holds businesses to account when expectations aren't met. Linking NCC practice to Primo sets a clearer benchmark. It encourages water businesses to engage early, justify their proposals properly, and commit to transparent service delivery. We expect this to drive stronger performance across the sector. And I will pause again for any comments or questions on these aspects. All right, maybe this one's clear. Oh, Jenny, go for it.
Sorry, hi, Rebecca. Just relative to the service that is delivered. A few years ago, a performance targets or charter, I suppose, were signed up with all the authorities around Victoria. Will those charters, being the minimum servicing standard, be altered because some of the servicing standards that are noted in the current charters are less than anywhere in Victoria, what like plumbing standards are? That's for flows and aspects around, well, I suppose it's community, well, it's the service that the community is receiving.
Great question. Angeline, did you want to respond to that?
Yes. So we hadn't, or we weren't looking to changing those service standards, but Jenny, in your, I know you sent a response to our draft framework paper on Friday, and thanks very much for that. That was really useful. We're working through that. We will look into that as part of the response to the framework and see if it's something we should be doing, if it's something that the industry wants as well.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't provide any information about that in that submission, but I can provide something.
Yeah.
Relative to that.
Well, for sure, if you want to provide, so we've taken it down as a issue to also consider. But yes, if you want to send it in a written form, in addition to what you've sent through, yeah, please do.
Thank you.
Also, we still can't get Peter online, but or his microphone unmuted, but I do have his question, and I can respond to it. So his question was, averaging of total costs across entire jurisdictions is quite different to local costs and benefit. What is the status of negotiated versus maximum new customer contributions, and maximums defined as the standard by water businesses? So on that, as we set out, the negotiated NCCs is the default of the Water Act, and our framework is really about encouraging businesses to use the negotiated framework a lot more and a lot better than we've currently seen. So what we have been seeing, in the last few price reviews is use of standard charges, so one single charge across the whole region, where the costs don't really justify that charge. So that seems to be as the default option a lot of water businesses have landed on, when what our framework's saying, well, the option, the negotiated is the default option, and standard should be used, in those specific circumstances where it really is appropriate to the actual development. So hopefully that answers your question, Peter.
Thanks, Angeline. Any other questions in regards to encouragement? All right. Oh, Alyssa.
Sorry, Rebecca, I just snuck in.
You're right.
Just in terms of the encouragement section and the link to the Primo ratings, is the expectation that the self-rating that we give for ourselves as a business will be consistent across NCCs and the rest of our price submission, or given this is sort of a revision to the framework, there might be some variation in how we self-rate ourselves?
I mean, what we are intending to do through really linking NCCs to Primo is to really demonstrate that the way that a business approaches NCCs is a core part of what a water business is responsible for and needs to deliver on. And so obviously Primo is intended to be a very high level assessment of 101 things that a water business must do to comply and self-rate against each of the Primo elements. So I wouldn't say that you would approach it differently or separately, but what it needs to do is be brought into the way that you would self-assess yourself as a business as a whole. All right. Thank you, everyone. This is obviously not your last opportunity to provide comment and feedback. And as I've already said, we will continue to work past the finalisation of the framework to deliver further information such as case studies that link to the new framework and further modelling support and education. But in the very short term, we are keen to hear anything further from you, but also to receive any written feedback from you. And submissions are due by the 11th of November. If you do provide a written submission, it will be published on our website, except if you have identified that it contains confidential or commercially sensitive information. So please clearly identify that if that is of concern for you. You can see the key questions that we've articulated, but obviously we're very happy for you to provide comment or question about any aspect of the draft framework. We are also really keen to have written feedback about where you might like us to do more work, such as we've already talked about case studies or further explanation of specific areas. With that, I'd like to thank you for your time and input today, and I will close by handing over to Marcus Crudden to do a quick close of today's forum. Thanks, Marcus.
Thanks everyone, and thanks for taking your time to attend today and your input. So we look forward to receiving those submissions by the 11th of November. Just a few themes that come up today. There appeared to be support for greater clarity and transparency within the framework, but some questions there about averaging of pricing principles. Perhaps clear expectations about the use of costing methodologies, the AIC versus incremental costs, and transparency in connection policies about what businesses are using. There continues to be interest in worked examples and case studies being part of the framework, that's something we're committed to do after the framework's settled. There are a number of questions about compliance monitoring and reporting, and how it be integrated into the existing auditing requirements, which I expect we'll do, but we have also said that monitoring reporting will commence from the next period. Again, strong support for wanting improved disclosures and transparencies, and indeed, I found Jenny's point about having to use FMI to get information is quite concerning, given we actually expect businesses to be quite transparent in dealing with developers on these things. So that's certainly, I think, a point we'll be really taking on, that businesses really need to be transparent in it, and that's a big part of trying to have published connection policies as part of the framework, so these things are actually clear to developers and other parties. Clearly, just perhaps a bit of further work about status of negotiated versus standard NCCs. As Angeline said, that standard has come to dominate, where if I went back about 15 years, the vast majority of developments, and certainly all large developments, were done on a negotiated basis, and that's something that did worry us, that things are defaulting to standard, or standards being applied in circumstances where it probably isn't appropriate. So I know that's a matter of concern. So I really do appreciate the comments and the feedback we got today. We really look forward to your written submissions. I thank everyone for taking your time to join us and ask questions today. And with that, we'll wrap up today's session, and we look forward to submissions. We're also committing to some training programs out of the framework. We're trying to have it wrapped up by December this year, but then in the new year, we'll be out talking to businesses about the actual framework and developing up the detailed modelling and things to assist as well. So thank you all for today, and take care.